Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. I am going to keep this class short because we have some additional weather that's coming our way here that is possibly going to affect. We've already had some power outages here and some other things going on. I'm actually having to use my cell phone for the internet here. I'm on my computer, but I'm having to use cell phone for internet. So I don't want to belabor this class too long. We've got a short subject to cover tonight. We could spend a lot of time on it, but we can also cover it fairly quickly with your all's help. So tonight, for PA 509, this class, we're focusing on game theory, which is a very useful economic tool to help us understand how to coordinate or how to better understand decision making across a variety of people who are trying to think rational and yet at the same time have to be able to reach some type of consensus or a coordinated solution. So does somebody want to describe for me to begin with what they think game theory is? I've kind of given a generic reason of why it exists, but somebody want to define for me based on either the reading or the videos, want to define for me game theory.
I guess I'll take a stab at it
Absolutely.
because I was unable to respond last week. So first of all, let me apologize to everyone. I had some work to take care of and I was unable to be verbally in the meeting or in class. So I'll take a stab at what game theory is. That's determining everyone's utility from the situation, determining how they would best respond, first of all, as an individual, what would be their best response, but then also what would be their best response given the probabilities of other people's decision making in the same situation.
That's excellent. And it ties into this concept known as strategic interdependence. What do we mean by that? Somebody else.
It means that in making a rational choice, you can't, it can't be done independently. You can't just look at a set of factors. The example the book uses is buying a loaf of bread. You can't just look at a set of information or data without also considering the choices being made by the other parties involved.
Right. So one example that they use to kind of talk about this in a game is an example of two people who want to meet each other at a restaurant, but can't decide in advance. They know of two restaurants they could choose from. Individually, they would each choose the restaurant that has the most utility to them, but that is different for each of them. So the question is, how do they figure out on their own without necessarily coordinating or being able to coordinate how to figure out which restaurant to go to? And so there's also that tendency that they would have to then go to the other's favorite restaurant to be amenable to them, thinking that was the case, but it's not necessarily that simple. Did some of you all have a chance to look at that example? Okay, Morgan, Catherine, based on the information provided, which one, and I'll go with Catherine first and then Morgan and Carl, what was the best choice?
In the restaurant example?
Yes.
It was the place where they would both be together. I can't remember the exact one, but obviously they both preferred to be at the same place as the other person.
Okay, Morgan, do you remember which one it was?
So if I understood it correctly, the ultimate best choice would be for both vegetarian, because
yes,
it's not Ethan's first choice, but it's the choice with the highest utility where they match, I think.
Okay, Carl, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I remembered it being vegetarian.
Okay. Yes, in this case, you know, obviously, if the male is smart, he chooses the vegetarian restaurant anyway. But in the case of looking at it from an economic or from a game theory perspective, Carl's utility is not as much eroded by choosing a vegetarian restaurant. I'm sorry, the male's, I forget his name, but his utility is not as eroded by going to a vegetarian restaurant as much as the other person's utility is eroded by going to a place where they wouldn't be able to eat. In other words, the male could figure out somewhere to eat, could eat something at the vegetarian restaurant, whereas the person who's a vegetarian would need to go to a vegetarian restaurant because the other place served pork. And you couldn't guarantee that there would necessarily be something on the menu that they can eat at. And I imagine this has become a far more common issue for families and for couples and whatever the case may be, because obviously our dietary differences are greater than they necessarily used to be. My daughter's gluten-free, so we kind of have to make sure to pick places where we can achieve this utility. And sometimes we just kind of go to the places that make most sense for her, as opposed to picking a place otherwise, because we have to make sure that her needs are met. So then we get to, so what is the idea? How do we evaluate the utility of all these decisions? What do we use for that? What's the term that's used to kind of the representation? What is the term for the representation of the utility with respect to these decisions? Well, if you look at your book,
Is it the utility curve?
right. Well, it's what's known as the Nash Equilibrium. And the Nash Equilibrium is utility curve, but here we're looking specifically at the Nash Equilibrium. I'm trying to remember where it is, because there's a definition
Page
that I want.
347. Page
Thank you.
347.
Thank you. It's the tool we use for figuring out what might happen. The Nash Equilibrium, it represents the strategy profile for every player. This formalizes this helps us understand how utilities match up. What are some examples of where this would be important with respect to public policy? I mean, obviously, we've talked about individual choices in private social encounters or couples encounters, but where would there be a need to have this available and understanding from a public policy perspective?
I'm thinking in terms of taxation.
Okay, in what way?
Making decisions so that whatever policy you're implementing isn't going to change the behavior of the people and the taxes you would be collecting.
Okay, if that's the goal, obviously
Or
there are
maybe it's
times
more of a
there,
fee, maybe.
right, and that's a possibility. Anybody want to extend upon that, or anybody else have another idea?
Are you
Okay.
looking for other specific policies or more generally?
We can be general about this.
So one of my understandings was for the Nash Equilibrium, everyone is doing what's best for themselves, which sort of leads into the conversation about diffuse interest and concentrated interest. So if everyone's working for themselves, but there's a lot of people who have the same or similar goals, then things will be more effective for that group versus if they're diffuse interests, it'll be more difficult for the true Nash equilibrium to be achieved.
Okay.
He got the boot, right? Like he got kicked off.
Yeah, he
think
appears
so.
to be in it.
Yeah, I think he got kicked off.
Sounds good. Just making sure I hadn't gone crazy.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. Y'all, I'm back. I think it was me. Did anybody else get cut off? Can y'all hear me?
We can. We think it was just you.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn off my screen to hopefully save some juice here. Sorry about that. So, uh, Morgan, can you repeat yourself? Because it was a very garbled conversation. And I think it was on my end.
Yeah, so I was saying what occurred to me was with the Nash equilibrium, everyone is searching for their greatest utility out of a situation, which led to the sort of the conversation about concentrated interest versus diffuse interest, where everyone is still trying to achieve their own goals, but if there are more people in one area or focusing on one thing, they're more likely to achieve the goal that they wanted.
True. No, that's a good point. So we talked about taxes. Another example I could give you is where you are offering where government is involved in something where there are going to be differences in preferences. So an easy example that I can give is, let's say you have a Parks and Recreation department that is involved in providing youth athletic programs. And you have to decide which sports to offer. And when you offer these programs, you realize that there is going to be a subsidy in providing these programs. And so what you have to do then is figure out how to enable the greatest level of participation in order to ensure that you're going to have broad, interested participation while at the same time being able to provide a sport that has that's the measure of utility, because by doing that, if youth are interested in the sport, even if it's not necessarily their first choice, they will adapt and participate in the sport. And then it kind of corresponds to what it kind of goes from there, from the standpoint of that. Then you have to look at the cost of providing that sport in terms of paying for equipment, paying for field maintenance, paying for officials, and figuring out what you can afford. So it's definitely got value from an expenditure side, because obviously when you're having to make budget decisions, you're making them on the basis of trying to figure out the best possible utility. But when you're dealing with services, what you're also have to take into consideration is the utility of the people that you serve, particularly with optional services, not mandated services. What you're trying to figure out is what to do with those services that may have a fee attached to them, or also be such that you're trying to provide them to the public at a reduced rate that is subsidized to encourage broader participation. And that's especially the case with youth programs. Any other examples people can think of? Okay. So that was what I wanted. That was what I really wanted to cover. Is there anything else that anybody would like to discuss? Okay. Well, we will have class next week. It will be on site. I believe that we'll primarily be talking about modern monetary theory. I will assign some readings for y'all tomorrow. I do have some readings I just need to carry forward from doing this previously. So that will be your reading assignment. Also, the third and final class discussion assignment will be sent out tomorrow morning. So everybody will have a chance to fill that out as well. And the due date for that will be next Friday, just like the one for this. I think I said it for Friday. I'm trying to remember if I said it for this Friday or next Monday, but the podcast assignment, which I know y'all are working on right now. If there's nothing else, then I thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you all very much. I apologize for the short class, but with the weather coming in, we want to make sure we got something done today. Have a great rest of the week, and I will see you all next Thursday. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.